how does sound and music work together in a big scene like that? Usually, and always, we're two separate departments. I'm in charge of the sound effects, the dialogue, the Foley, all of the impacts, the explosions, the spaceship sounds, and the composer is in charge of the music, the themes, the songs that go into the film. And very often, that is a difficult collaboration. It's a difficult battle, not entirely due to personalities necessarily, but simply because of timeline. We are usually all racing towards the finish line to get it done, and the type of work that we're doing has many layers to it, and so it's extremely complicated and difficult to change, cut footage out, move things around. You're making a complete product, but that's the way film is. It's always changing and moving. Visual effects are coming in and making things shorter or longer, and you have to adjust. Working with Mr. Giacchino was a miracle because he seemed to really understand, more than other composers, sonic real estate. And he would compose in such a way, he really gives you the sense when his music comes in that he has watched the film, understands the beats, understand that dialogue has to be heard in there, understand that, well, visually we're seeing a gigantic explosion here, unless, there's some very good reason for it, we're probably going to hear that. So maybe putting the most intricate details of music aren't appropriate. Maybe stepping back for a moment to let that breathe is good. And he would do all of those things. So he presented a score that really allowed the sound effects to shine, the dialogue to be clear, and the music to just stand out. That was a wonderful experience on Star Trek. I think he just exercised an interior common sense that, a really good composer has when watching a film. It was more like, rather than him looking at what we did and reacting to it, he looked at the film and saw what it would need, where he would be needed, and where it would be good to, take a breather. And it was fantastic. So that Star Trek was one of my favorite collaborations between music and sound. The canon of the sounds of Star Trek were this safety net, or this cozy place you could retreat to. If you couldn't improve something, you always had, the sick bay sound, and at a certain point it became fun to try to plug in little pieces, little homages to, just for the fans to make it realistic. At one point in the beginning, before the swarm ship battle occurs, Captain Kirk says, "Hail them." So you could go back into the old catalog and be like, what on earth is the hailing sound? Oh, here it is. It actually already exists, and it sounds great, because we've been hearing it for 50 years. Some things we would try to tinker with, as I think everybody who's done sound on the Star Trek has, like the transporter. And I found that that you could do things to it that were appropriate for the new visual effects, because the visual effects team put different sparks or light beams or a sort of vortex swirl on it. And so we would riff on the new visual effects. But I found if you differed too much, if you took out too much of the original transporter DNA, you'd kind of wreck the transporter. It has this thing that after 50 years, we know what a transporter that's functioning properly sounds like. And so it was not broken, and we did not intend to fix it. I really liked when Krull's ship showed up. That was one of those moments where Giacchino had kind of left this pocket open to do something, and so we had been working on the sound of Krull's ship. He sort of flies around, goes up, and then drives his ship right into the Enterprise, and that was, just a fun moment to play with spaceship sounds, with piercing metal, with the introduction of a new villain, and so you knew that entrance had to be something massive. So in the midst of all of this chaos and explosions and the sort of, heartache of the Enterprise being destroyed, you had
the
entrance of a villain, and I thought that was very effective and was a ton of fun to work on.
Were there any challenges?
Tons, one after the other. I think a great fun sound was in terms of a new hero was Jayla's. Her boomstick, her staff that she swung around, or was a gun at times, or a hologram. I mean, that thing was just fun. And Elliot Connors, one of the designers I work with, just came up with fantastic sounds. Really, really fun stuff. Lightsaber quality design that, as soon as you heard it, you just loved it. And then that stuck and was really, very, very satisfying, fun new sound. I felt like the crawl brain suck was particularly difficult because that one there was so much timing that was involved, and yet the visual effects for these faces that were changing were so complicated that they came in very late. So we had to come up with a sound that we didn't know what it was going to look like, but it had to be very sync oriented in terms of the screams of what these, victims were going through as they were transforming. So that was one of those things where you had to prepare a lot of different sounds and be prepared, at a moment's notice when the new visual effects would come in to suddenly get all of your sounds lined up and make this thing work. It was supposed to be horrifying and yet, still palatable.